Record now.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Yep.
I think I'm recording right now.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. And then share screen again. Okay, we just gotta wait for China to sign in. I'm a little nervous for time, but I'll try my best to get through it.
It's all good. If you end early, we'll just chat.
Or it's gonna be too late. I have 45 minutes, right? I have until.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. We'll get China in. Are you there, China?
Yeah, sorry. I don't know why your screen kept going away for me every time I went to go log in, but I got it now.
Sorry. Because I kept.
It's also my computer right now. I don't know what it's doing.
Perfect. Okay. Let's do this. Start. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to be doing my presentation on integrating Indigenous storytelling into the arts. And we're going to do it through a Kahoot. So I'll have slides on the Kahoot, but then there's also times where you can participate and answer questions. I'll try and give you a heads up, but just so that you're ready for it. So the schedule for the conference is we're going to start talking about appropriation and versus appreciation in the classroom. And there's a couple videos to go along with that. And then how to make sure that you appreciate Indigenous culture in your classroom and ways to do so. And then we're going to talk about storytelling in the classroom and ways in which you can, the proper way to teach Indigenous stories. And then I'm going to read an Indigenous story called The Butterflies, and then show you 3 different art activities that you can use with the story, and also you can use it with any Indigenous story. And then we'll just go over some questions and resources. Okay, so I want to watch this quick video because it shows the history of art from an Indigenous perspective. So this video is from the Ontario Arts Council. We're not watching the full 10 minutes. It's just a couple minutes of it. Can we hear it?
Yep.
Okay.
Cultural appropriation is something that the Indigenous community is dealing with constantly at the moment. You know, it seems to be a never-ending stream of misuse and appropriation and misrepresentation of our culture.
We're very much positioned as something that can be extracted or taken within this settler colonial system. Our artistic practices and our cultural practices are also sort of seen as being there for the taking.
Our art comes from land and goes back to it. Now, if you have an overblown sense of entitlement, think everything belongs to you, then you're going to be taught to exploit what belongs to you, as opposed to let the land teach you.
For many years or decades, centuries, people, researchers, anthropologists, ethnographists went into Aboriginal communities and they took the knowledge, they took the objects, they took the ideas, they took the medicine, they took everything, and then they left. We're faced with institutions that are very powerful and that are so convinced that they're right all the time. And they're so convinced, using the logic of the Western art world, that they're on the top of the pyramid and that their knowledge is universal.
It constantly comes up with in fashion or clothing or even in media, where something looks cool, like a headdress, and without any context or understanding of why that is important.
It is critical in the process to address protocols. And why it's critical is because we have endured so much appropriation, and with that appropriation and misrepresentation over the years, and particularly through the arts and cultural institutions. Ultimately, for one not to engage in that process, the worst case scenario is you're actively contributing to the degradation of a people and a cultures of this land.
So that video just kind of sums up how art has been appropriated in Indigenous cultures and why it's important to have this discussion during this conference before I teach you just some ways to integrate it so that we can follow the protocols while we integrate it. So there's going to be a little quiz coming up, and it's going to ask you to choose the correct definition of cultural appropriation. So I kind of tricked you there. So cultural appropriation itself is adopting elements of a culture in a disrespectful way or stereotypical way. The answer that two of you chose, customs, arts, and social institutions of a particular group of people, that's what's being appropriated rather than what appropriation is. So cultural appropriation in the classroom can look like wearing costumes at Halloween or when you're doing skits that are from Canada's past, wearing outfits that are meant for elders or people to be wearing, Indigenous people to be wearing. It also can look like not using Indigenous resources to teach the topic. So say you were teaching grade 3 social studies. I think there's a unit talking about colonialism and when the settlers came. It's important to talk about also what the Indigenous people were doing before the settlers came and using sources that Indigenous people wrote to teach the history. So that kind of moves into not just teaching white dominant perspectives. I know when I was a kid, we just learned about pioneers. We didn't even learn about the Anishinaabe or the Métis people or different nations in Canada. And cultural appropriation can stem from not having these challenging conversations with students and just avoiding teaching colonialism altogether. So now we're going to move on to cultural appreciation, and here's a quick definition of cultural appreciation.
And cultural appreciation truly honors our nation's arts and cultures. When you appreciate, you take the time to learn and interact, to gain understanding of a culture or cultures different from your own. It is a cultural exchange based in mutual respect. The key is consent and participation. If it is about us, then it must include us. A few ways you can truly appreciate Indigenous peoples and culture. Know our history. I don't mean just yours or mine. I mean our collective history. So we truly understand where we come from and where we come together. Remember, appreciation good.
So what I've been trying to do with the past 2 videos is use definitions and videos from an Indigenous perspective, because like this woman said, we have to use their perspective and our perspective when teaching. It's collective. So I'm going to be teaching about Indigenous storytelling, but I think it's very important to be bringing their perspective in to appreciate their culture and their stories. So cultural appreciation, another definition, is when someone seeks to understand and learn about another culture in an effort to broaden their perspective and connect with others cross-culturally. So on the next slide, there's a brainstorming activity that you can type in something that you can do in the classroom to appreciate the culture. And I think you can just type one answer for this one. Awesome. So some of the answers are read books written by Indigenous people, taking time to understand what the land about the land and what it means, and have storybooks in the classroom. Those are all great answers. And yeah, we're going to talk about the importance of storybooks written by Indigenous people today. So just to finish off about the protocols from the Ontario Arts Council. So when you are teaching Indigenous topics, like I said, it's important to know the history of the person who is telling the story. It's important to know what nation they came from. Important to use Indigenous resources. I think a very important thing is to bring in elders to teach and find those people in your community to come in and teach topics. And then from there, you can use what they've learned from the elders to extend their learning to cover more curriculum expectations. Teach from the cumulative perspective, so from a white settler perspective and the Indigenous perspective. Doing it in a respectful manner, using the proper terms, knowing the history. Reciprocity is also an important takeaway when teaching Indigenous topics, and that can include when you, like I was just talking with Doe, if an elder comes to your classroom to teach and share their knowledge, it's important to reciprocate their generosity by giving them something of money, or a thank you, or something from the students, like a gift back to them. It's important to include others, and willingness. And I think willingness is also very important, because you have to have that want and that drive to learn Indigenous topics, and the willingness to share and find the resources. So I think there's a question on the next slide. Oh no, so now we're going to move into storytelling. And so storytelling in a broad sense, like from an Indigenous perspective, or just any picture book, it's important to have in the classroom because it introduces new vocabulary. You're reading words to students that they might not be able to read per se, but by saying it orally, they're still going to learn that word, and it'll help them build their vocabulary. It provides a model for fluency and expression. So the way that you read, students will copy it. It creates a classroom community in a sense that when you're reading a story, everybody's listening and everybody's participating as a community. It helps construct meanings, connect ideas and experiences across text. And you can do that by having conversations and thought-provoking questions like, oh, there was a rabbit in this story. Is there anything similar with the one that we just read? And that also activates the prior knowledge. And any read alouds also improves the information processing skills, vocabulary, and comprehension. Okay, so true or false, Indigenous storytelling is important to incorporate into the classroom. Yeah, we all got that one.